for inviting me. Looking forward to your questions and getting to know this year's students. Today, I'm going to talk about innovating for a sustainable future, exploring biodesign and circular economy. So as Dan mentioned, I'm a biologist and microbiologist. I have a master's degree in biological sciences and a PhD in plant pathology. But I'm actually a professor in the School of Architecture and Design, working in this interdisciplinary pedagogy, binding or combining design thinking tools with biotechnologies and knowledge from nature. My interests are in biodesign and in interdisciplinary pedagogies. So it is not a surprise that the world today faces complex, interconnected challenges, including social inequities, emerging public health threats, and the far-reaching consequences of climate change. While science and technology offer powerful tools to address many of these issues, there are significant obstacles to their widespread adoption. For example, there's societal resistance, technological scalability, and high costs. We could see in pandemia that there were so many people not wanting to be vaccine or use the COVID-19 vaccines because they didn't know what consequences they might have. And many countries in Europe ban genetically modified organisms or food that is genetically modified. The thing is, technologies themselves are not inherently good or bad. Rather, their impact depends on how they are applied and who has access to them. The risk lies in deepening existing inequalities, where some populations benefit from these advancements while others are excluded. This is where the concept of biodesign becomes crucial. Biodesign merges the principles of design thinking with cutting-edge biotechnologies and the emulation of nature to develop innovative, practical solutions to real-world challenges. In today's complex landscape, a system thinking approach is necessary to address these issues effectively. For instance, world hunger cannot simply be solved by developing a superfood. The true challenge lies in ensuring such innovations reach the people who need them, considering their cultural, social, and political factors that influence their acceptance. Even when problems are shared globally, solutions must be locally adapted to maximize their impact. And an example of this, I don't know if you have heard of the golden rice in Africa. So they genetically modified rice to include beta-carotenoids, which is a vitamin that is essential for eyesight. And they had to include it in rice because that's what the population ate. You cannot just take, for example, carrots to a population that might not be used to eating carrots. So there's a lot of different factors we need to take into consideration to really solve a problem or a challenge. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals set a global framework for addressing these issues, and biodesign can play a pivotal role in achieving them. By collaborating closely with communities, biodesign ensures that solutions are co-created, culturally relevant, and practical. This approach helps ensure that solutions are not just theoretically sound, but also practically viable and widely adopted. Biodesign projects often begin with an interest in a specific biotechnology, an organism, or an ecosystem. Alternatively, they may stem from a social challenge that demands an innovative solution, or from ethical concerns regarding a potential solution. I will next give examples of these different biodesign approaches in action. So my first example, please let me see if you can see this video. Yeah. So in 2019, a group of students from my biodesign course stumbled with a YouTube video showing a liquid that was being added to cold water, causing it to freeze immediately. They were intrigued by this phenomena, and they began investigating further and discovered that the liquid contained a nucleating protein, or a freezing protein, originally synthesized by bacteria known as Pseudomonas syringae. a plant pathogen. In nature, this protein helps the bacteria freeze water inside plant leaves, breaking the tissue and allowing the bacteria to spread. Scientists have genetically engineered the protein and applied it in ski resorts to create snow, artificial snow, when temperatures aren't cold enough. The students demonstrated that the protein could form ice at temperatures as high as 2 degrees Celsius, meaning it could use a refrigerator rather than a freezer, saving energy. They combined the biotechnology with nanotechnology to extend the freezing time and allow the proteins to be reused. They identified an application for vaccine transport in rural areas of Colombia, where they designed a container that ensured the cold chain while also improving comfort for carriers, avoiding back pain and preventing vial breakage on rough roads. This project won the overall prize at the Biodesign Challenge in 2019. Today, it has evolved into a startup selling ice packs with the biotechnology and container that folds to save space when empty. So you can, if you want to know a little bit more about it, you can go to the nanofreeze.com.co website. A second example is a student project called Must Go, inspired by the Páramo ecosystem in Colombia. So this was a nature-driven biodesign approach. During an exploration of this ecosystem, the students became fascinated with the Sphangum megalanicum moss and its highly absorbent properties. Initially, they considered using this moss for their superabsorbent proteins, which might become an alternative to the polymers used in diapers, for example. However, they came across a Peruvian thesis suggesting that moss could capture microplastics from water. Concerned by research showing that humans may be consuming the equivalent of a credit card's worth of microplastic each week, they shifted their focus and developed a prototype filter using Sphangum melanicum to capture microplastics from tap water in coastal regions of Colombia, with promising lab results. This project won the overall prize at the Biodesign Challenge in 2022. Unfortunately, the project has remained at a prototype stage because students continue on their life with other classes and other things, but it's definitely a potential to continue exploring. The third example is Lixilab, is a socially driven biodesign initiative focusing on heavy metal water contamination. In collaboration with farmers near Bogota in Colombia, Lixilab addresses concerns over crop loss and animal illness due to suspected contamination from local landfills. Using a portable system that employs the bacterium Licinobacillus ferricus, Lixilab cleanses water of heavy metals. The team also educates the community through workshops and digital content about bioremediation. This project won the 2024 Transformative Research Challenge. And what I like a lot about this project is that it takes technology to the community, right? Bioremediation is something that has been widely used, but it's usually scientists or technicians who do the remediation process. This group was interested in bringing that technology directly to the users. The fourth example is SCOBY Bubble Wrap, a challenge-driven biodesign project that emerged when students were tasked with finding alternatives to plastic use. They discovered that bacterial cellulose, which is formed through a symbiosis, this is why the tea, I don't know if you have ever tried the tea called kombucha. The kombucha, you'll see that there's like this supernatant, something like swimming around the tea, which is a symbiosis between bacteria and yeast. And they produce, through the fermentation, the bacterial cellulose. And they learned that this bacterial cellulose could be transformed into a material resembling plastic bubble wrap. Not only does this material effectively protect objects, but it also decomposes under composting conditions, returning nutrients to soil in case you didn't want to give a second use to the material. Last, an ethically driven biodesign project. This is called Parturient, and it was presented at the 2017 Biodesign Challenge by students at the AREZ University of Arts. The project stemmed from the idea of artificial wombs inspired by the success of cloning Dolly, the lamb, through an artificial womb. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, now several years ago, that there was a lamb that was created in an artificial womb outside of the lamb. The students proposed the concept of using artificial wombs to birth babies, suggesting that busy parents could choose their children's physical traits before birth. While technologically feasible, such a proposal raises significant questions. Could this lead to greater inequality? What are the long-term consequences? These questions can be explored through speculative design, considering what kind of future we truly want. So what speculative design invites people to reflect upon what would happen if this was true. What would happen if this technology arrives in the hands of these people and this would be done? It doesn't mean that technology advances should not be continued, but it questions us what are the uses we should give to technology. Because if we're genetically modifying a fetus, for example, to avoid a disease, maybe that's a right path. But if we are changing fetuses just because we want our children's eyes to be different, or their muscles to be like this and like that, or the height or other traits, maybe not, right? So it allows us to reflect before it becomes a reality. So these examples I have just presented illustrate the diverse ways biodesign can address a range of challenges, from environmental to social, through innovation, sustainability, and ethical solutions. Whether inspired by nature, driven by social needs, or motivated by ethical concerns, biodesign offers a powerful toolkit for creating impactful change. But just because a solution is bio-based, does that make it perfect? As designers in a biodesign team, it is essential to constantly ask ourselves critical questions. For example, what if we design to prevent waste and pollution in the first place? What if we create an economy that uses available resources by designing durable items that can be reused, remanufactured, and recycled, ensuring that products or their components stay in circulation in our planet? What if, in addition to protecting the environment, we intentionally designed to improve it? A circular economy offers a systemic approach aimed at generating economic opportunities while benefiting society and the environment. Sustainability, in essence, seeks a balance between economic growth, human well-being, and environmental regeneration. So the Circular Economy Systems diagram by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation illustrates a clear distinction between renewable and finite materials. Materials closer to the center of the diagram, here, are ideal, while those at the far ends, these ones here, right, are better than not doing nothing, but less encouraged. For example, when recycling plastics, the material is often lost in the process, energy is consumed, and microplastics may be released in the environment. However, recycling existing plastics is still preferable to creating new plastics from virgin materials. Ideally, we should aim to reuse items multiple times, or if that's not possible, consider alternative materials. The same principle applies to renewable materials. If, for example, you have a cotton shirt you no longer want, it's best to pass it on to someone else or repurpose it, such as turning it into a sofa stuffing, rather than discarding it. However, biological or organic materials don't return to nature immediately. They require composting or proper treatment. Though beneficial, these processes can still have environmental impacts as well. So let's now, I'm going to talk a little bit about examples of projects that have been addressed through the biodesign methodology, but thinking a little bit about an industry, the fashion industry, which is a major contributor to global to global environmental problems, ranking as the second largest consumer of water and responsible for approximately 10% of global carbon emissions. In Colombia, the fashion sector's rapid expansion has led to increased textile waste and pollution, worsening water contamination and resource depletion. Despite its economic importance, representing 10.52 trillion pesos in 2024, with a 6.3% increase from 2023, and employing about 17% of the workforce, the sector's environmental impact cannot be ignored. So there's a project called eBiodye, which introduces a groundbreaking solution to one of the fashion industry's most polluting processes, dye. Here in this picture, you can see a river in Medellin, a city in Colombia, which is red in certain times of the year because of the dyes that have been used in the textile industry, which are released in this water source. Traditional dyeing methods use vast amounts of water and produce toxic runoffs, contributing significantly to environmental harm. eBiodye utilizes engineered microorganisms to produce eco-friendly dyes, drastically reducing water usage and pollution. This innovation not only offers sustainable alternatives to conventional dyeing techniques, but also creates economic opportunities in Colombia's biotechnology sector. I currently work with Diego Hernandez, who's the CEO of this startup. He's doing his master's degree where he's always thinking about the initial ingredients or reagents to transform this bacteria. Traditionally, when you do genetically transformations, there's a step of using antibiotics to select those bacteria that have been successfully transformed. Diego has seen that not including that antibiotic doesn't decrease the number of bacteria being transformed. So he's each time reducing the number of reagents being used or the harm of using antibiotics, because we have seen how bacteria have been generating resistance to antibiotic because of its prophylactic use in different industries. While scalability remains a challenge, with infrastructure and material acceptance being key factors, eBiodye illustrates how biodesign can address critical environmental issues while fostering economic growth. Another example in the fashion industry is Saudia. Saudia offers a pioneering solution to ethical and environmental challenges within Colombia's reptile skin trade, a sector notorious for illegal hunting and habitat destruction. This project remains at a speculative stage, but it uses in vitro production of reptile skins, significantly reducing the need for animal exploitation. Through tissue culture and harvesting, this process minimizes harm to reptiles and mitigates environmental damage associated with traditional methods. Saudia's approach aligns with Colombia's conservation goals by supporting endangered species, protection, and promoting ethical luxury markets. However, scalability faces challenges due to high production costs and the needs for regulatory frameworks supporting the lab-grown alternatives. Still, it represents a crucial step towards redefining luxury fashion with sustainability at its core. This project particularly reminds me of other projects that can be included within the biodesign, let's say, spectrum, and it's the lab-grown meat. Perhaps you have heard of Impossible Burgers and these vegan meats that are available in the market. There's an issue with the greenwashing and the terms that people and markets have been using. Those meats are not 100% vegan because in the process of the in vitro growth of the meat, there are reagents or ingredients that must be added. One of those is the fetal bovine serum. In Spanish, it's called suero fetal bovino. So it's obtained from the fetus, and it's a ingredient that it's essential nutrient for the meat to grow, for the tissue to grow. So this doesn't mean that the technology is bad, or because it's not 100% vegan, people are not going to accept it. But I do encourage people to be honest about the processes and to find where are the opportunities to improve the methodologies. Can we find alternatives to this fetus bovine serum that do not depend on killing animals in order to obtain it? Another example is the Feeling Green project, which addresses the ethical and environmental concerns surrounding the down feathers and polyester by proposing plant-based alternatives to down. So using corn silk, pineapple leaves, and tururi sacks, which are all remnants of agricultural processes, the Feeling Green offers renewable biodegradable materials free from the cruelty often associated with animal-derived products. These materials, such as corn silk, are often discarded as agricultural byproducts, and their use in fashion promotes sustainability while reducing waste. However, challenges lie in the availability and harvesting of these materials, particularly the tururi fiber, which is native to specific regions of Colombia. Overcoming logistical and supply chain barriers will be essential for the widespread adoption of these materials. Something that is important in this circular economy mindset is that whenever there's a solution that sounds promising, the next step is to think, how do I make this global? How do I take this everywhere? And there's where we might have issues. But if solutions stay local and address local challenges, they might be real solutions and sustainable solutions. We might next think of, in different parts of the world, what other materials can I find that can successfully fulfill the requirements I need in my material. My last example is bridology. Bridology challenges traditional ideas of wedding attire with its creation of a biodegradable wedding dress made from cornstarch, gelatin, and dandelion fibers. This project embraces the principles of circularity and biodegradability, aiming to reduce the environmental footprints of the fashion industry. While the biodress offers a novel solution to fashion waste, it requires specific preservation conditions such as avoiding high temperatures. Scaling production while ensuring durability and performance in various conditions remains a challenge. Nevertheless, bridology represents an inspiring example of how fashion can embrace by exploring alternatives in biodegradable materials. So it's not only the material, but also how we communicate this to clients, how we help people come out of this fast fashion mindset and appreciate more slow fashion things that are created locally. How do I buy things that are already used but in good conditions? Or, for example, as is the wedding dress, something I will use once in my life. Probably I will not do anything with that dress. Why do I want it to be eternal? So biodesign holds immense potential to be a transformative tool, bridging the gaps between social equity, environmental sustainability, and economic viability. It exemplifies how innovation in the intersection of design, technology, and nature can create solutions that benefit society, the environment, and the economy. The projects discussed highlight the power of biodesign to solve complex challenges in the fashion industry, but at the beginning, I also showed examples outside of the fashion industry, whether driven by the environment, ethical, or social concerns. If you're interested in learning more about the pedagogical approach employed at Universidad de los Andes to develop biodesign projects, feel free to check out the book Biodesign for High Schools. It's available through the QR codes. Here I have the QR code for the book in English, and it's also available in Spanish in case that is easier for you. So with that, I finished. I wanted to leave some time for questions. I have a lot of more examples of biodesign I would love to share, but I'm more interested in hearing about the audience's interests. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Giovanna. That's a great presentation. Yeah, and like she said, we're opening the floor for questions. So if anyone has a questions, please open your mic or put it in the chat. Yeah.
I apologize if I spoke really fast. I get super excited and I just talk.
Really easy to follow. No problem.
Okay.
Are there no questions at all?
Any questions? Interested about more example? There's a question.
Yes, Adina.
Hi, Giovanna. Thank you so much for your presentation. We are working in a Fab city project, more like Fab region project in the Germany part, the Bergisches Dreieck triangle. And we, as maybe three small cities, maybe different in the context of maybe Bogota or another like big city. So we also face, for example, challenges in the textile industry. Nevertheless, we see, I mean, through the examples you present, I was wondering how that could be possible that citizens or have access to such a tools and such approach, and also how um, yeah, companies can, for example, implement these tools. How scalable are these practices in because it's also a very important part in the Fab City model. So yeah, that's my question.
Super. So, with regards to the companies, there's this issue. If users don't change their mindset, companies are still going to produce things that are cheap, no matter like the materials they're using or the damage that is doing either to the environment or social conditions, because we're aware that a lot of things are done in countries where they don't pay people wages that are reasonable. They're working like long hours, and it's not ethically responsible working conditions, right? But if users start changing their mindsets with biodesign, I usually tell my students, it's not waiting until others change. It's not waiting until the companies change, until political laws are written so that we behave properly, but how can I change in my decisions on a daily basis? So when clients are looking for companies that are really sustainable and transparent in their processes, where do the things come from? There's a problem, and is that we are not aware of what we're wearing and how it is produced. So I'm wearing blue jeans right now. I have no idea what are the materials in my blue jeans, how it was dyed, where it was produced, under what conditions. So I think companies should be very transparent on their processes. And if they are more expensive today, they have this statement of why, and like this purpose, right? So they'll have a niche of customers that will be interested and that can afford that. Something that I have questioned myself always is like, why being sustainable is more expensive? Because like, what if I want to be sustainable and I don't have the money to buy things that are like biotechnologically created? That is something we have to aim for. So there we have to start creating things locally, I believe, because every time like a company wants to reach like the global market, it suddenly becomes unsustainable somehow. But if there's a lot of different markets locally producing things, I think we will arrive to a model that will be a little bit more sustainable. And it's like cell phones 30 years ago. There were many little people who actually had, like very few people had access to a cell phone. Today, I think almost everyone in the world has a cell phone, right? Because technology is advanced. When more people are interested, there's more efforts and more investments, and things are done at a lower cost. And I think more people are going to have access to this. Then how are companies aware of this? They have to like look and partner up for me, there's this gap between academia and industry, because academia is constantly thinking about these solutions, but as I was mentioning with the Must Go project, unfortunately, there are class projects. So the class ends and the project remains there. And students that want to continue with the idea, sometimes these ideas are kind of babies to them. So they don't want to share the idea, they don't want to give it away. And that doesn't allow the idea to grow as much as it could potentially grow. But if academia learns that by combining with industry that has a mindset of scaling, a mind that is connected very well, that has the infrastructure to incubate these ideas, probably a lot of more ideas would successfully become reality. So I think there has to be a greater collaboration between academia and the industry. And then last, what I believe is there's a need for students to create things from scratch. So when we talk about, for example, bacterial cellulose, which is a material that has been very popular in the biodesign world, as well as mycelia-based materials, all these materials that have fungal products. Students want to start from scratch instead of working with people that already know the know-how of how to grow the materials and then taking that to another level. So when we see projects, we usually see the same projects again and again and again, because people start from the beginning and arrive to the same stage. But if we would start from where we are now, reading research papers, patents, working with industries, working with people that have the knowledge, perhaps this idea will arrive to a second, third level that will really transform societies. And then again, there has to be government supporting this. I know in Europe, there are laws that promote circular economy and no plastic. The companies are aiming to have certain things by certain years, so that encouraged them to accelerate their process. For example, in Colombia, there was a law that banned single-use plastic. It's the only way people are going to stop doing things, because it's a change in the culture, it's a change in the mindset. Why do I have to depend on plastic all the time? But again, for example, if you see the straws, the plastic straws versus the cornstarch straws, people complain about those because they become wrinkled really fast. They're sometimes annoying when you're drinking something super cold. So plastic is still a really good material, right? I don't like criticizing materials. It's just thinking about their uses and finding alternatives. There's sometimes, for example, in the bubble wrap, there's no need to use the bubble wrap if there's other alternatives. Or styrofoam, for example, when you buy a computer that it's covered with styrofoam in the corners, or a TV, why use that instead of using material like mycelia-based materials that then you can throw away, and in composting conditions they'll return to nature quickly. So it's thinking about like the uses of the material. I hope I answered your question, Brian.
Yeah, it's a complex question. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just want to say how excited I am to be on this call, and I'm sorry if the question I asked was already answered. I kind of was in the middle of 3 different things while on this meeting, but tried to focus as much as possible. But one of the things I'm working on with a large group of people is different regenerative practice ideas, including education campuses with working environments. And my question to you is, the glue that we're using to leverage all of the connection points is blockchain with an app called Agricultural Value Chain Network. And I'm wondering, since you mentioned one very important thing, since most people have a cell phone, and this is the critical thing right here, since most people have a cell phone, what we're going to do is leverage that to create a kind of a regenerative finance model where we can trace every single thing that was started in the ground and wound up in the market. And I'm wondering whether or not in your program you are working with kind of integrating technology like that with blockchain technology and using AI. We're also using sensors to actually understand a lot more. and the sensors will connect to all the other different farms in this use case to actually really give an understanding. And the whole idea is transparency, because I think what happens is, you're right, there's so much of a need to actually have the transparency of these things, but how do we actually verify and validate them? So that would be part of the question. And the other question was really interesting about the plastics. Part of this education campus working environment is about creating recycle centers that actually upcycle material into building materials. So part of the initiative is to take what we have. Of course, the plastic straws, we can't necessarily get rid of them right now. We need something. We need some of these things. I mean, the industry created recyclables to kind of give an excuse to recyclable, the idea of recycle, to give the excuse to have to recycle materials that we don't really need. So how do we deal with it? We got them. So I would, I'm curious whether or not also part of your program is dealing with the recyclables in a way where we upcycle the materials.
Mm-hmm. Great questions. So I'm not working directly with either of those things. More like giving students the questions for them to include them in their projects. The first one, I think it's the future. We really, consumers want to know a little bit more about, not a little bit more, a lot more about where their products come from. There's a lot of greenwashing going around today. So things that are bio-based not necessarily mean that they're better than synthetic ones. That is something that we need to forget about. It's synthetic doesn't mean bad. We usually generalize certain words. So whenever we hear about chemical or genetically modified or synthetics, it's like evil, right? But it's not necessarily the case. Sometimes these are even better than organic materials, because to transform organic materials, you also need to use water, heat, and to produce those plants. For example, in the fashion industry, if I have to grow cotton trees, it depends where I'm growing the cotton trees. They will require a lot of water, a lot of pesticides, and a lot of different other things that are also harmful to the environment. And also, I'm cultivating a crop that is taking space for food, for example, right? Why not use materials that are already agricultural waste that can be used as fibers, right? So it's exploring what do we have available in our planet that we can optimize and use better. Then the with the traceability is also important, because sometimes we only think about the material when we have it, like, okay, so I have my cotton, but how is the cotton produced? Who is producing it? Under what conditions? Those things are really important. And then in the industry perspective, industry should not just create things, sell them, and forget about it. Industry should think, what is going to be the life cycle of my product when it ends its use? Where is it going to end up? How do I help optimize this recycling chains? Because a lot of things can be recycled, but society is not it's not organized in a way that it facilitates recycling objects, right? So a lot of things that can potentially be recycled do not end up in the proper places. They end up in landfills, and that is a huge environmental problem. So one question I would ask you is, how do we avoid materials from ending up in landfills in the first place? How do we keep them circling around the planet and circling around different industries? So for example, when we create things, there are different companies. There is a company that sells carpets that I have seen that in their design, they use different colors so that in case, for example, wine spills in the carpet, you don't have to throw it all away because of the color mismatch and stuff like that. You just change the part that is dirty and they replace it with a different one. And then when you take that to the company, they are able to take all its parts and reincorporate it in their cycle. That's why they have to make sure they don't use glues, for example, that cannot be reused, or materials that cannot be reincorporated in their cycle. If the company itself cannot reincorporate the materials, then I think it's responsible for them to think who can. So for example, Michelin and the tires. maybe sometimes they can reuse it, but other times they sell it so that other businesses can reuse these tires, which are materials that are amazing for a lot of different things, for the streets, for a lot of different uses. So I think it's a responsibility also of the producer to think, where is my product going to end its life cycle? Then with the second one, the plastics, I agree with you. Sometimes biodesigns can be a little bit wicked in a way, because so I recently heard here in the city where I am, Manizales, there's a person who's growing a fungus that is able to eat styrofoam, polypropylene. Do everyone know what styrofoam is? Because I don't know if it's a commercial name. It is, yeah. So that is something that is highly contaminant. But again, when we give these types of innovations, oh, there's a fungus that eats plastic, there's a fungus that eats styrofoam, then people use styrofoam and plastic without thinking, because there's something else that's going to degrade it. And that's not the way we should think about it. It's good that we find an organism that is able to degrade these things, metabolize them, and end them. But in the first place, we should be avoiding this use of virgin material when there's so much material already available to reuse. And in the case of plastics, there are alternatives. So water bottles. For me, I don't know why water bottles exist. If everyone can have their own water bottle and take it and like just refill it with water, why do we sell water bottles in the first place? Or it's thinking about those single-use plastics and how can we change it. I sometimes think of how should the supermarkets of the future look like? Should there still have shampoos and soaps and a lot of this, like think of all the materials that have all the products that they sell that come with plastics. Here in Colombia, you find apples that are covered with plastics. Like they sell it like in bags or covered with plastics things. I'm like, why? Why can't I just get my apples and bring them home? So there's a lot of things where we're using plastic that doesn't make sense. And I think that's the first thing we should question ourselves, like, how do we avoid uses of plastics where it's not needed in the first place? I don't know, Brian, if you were going to say something, I interrupted you, sorry.
Oh, there was I was just going to say thank you so much for that affirmation. It's just really, sometimes when I have an idea, I get imposter syndrome sometimes, but then of course I think all of us do, but I just really wanted to commend you for what you're doing, and just thank you for showing me that, some of the thoughts I have are right, but really explaining it in a way that I could never have explained it.
Super. And I feel like every day we'll have more certifications and laws that will enforce companies to be much more transparent in their processes, because we have to be responsible with what we're doing and thinking not about how we have done things just because we have done it that way, it works the best way. So I'm going to give you an example. For example, here in Colombia, they used to milk cows at 3 a.m. in the morning in all around Colombia. And that's because in the past, they didn't have the cooling systems to store the milk and keep it cool until the truck would arrive and take the milk to the where they will process it. So that's why they had to do it really early in the morning, because later at 6, 7, it's sunny, it's hot, and the milk will just become damaged. But there's people today that still milk at 3 a.m. because they have this thought that that's at the time where the cows give the most milk. And that's not the reason. They have to know like why we did things. So today people can just wake up at 6 a.m., milk their cows, and wait until the truck comes with it. So we have to stop and reflect, why are we doing things the way we're doing it? How can we do it differently? Does it make sense to continue doing things the way we're doing it? Those are the reflections I invite people to constantly do.
Thank you. Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have another question in the chat as well. I will ask it. So from Tomo, do you have any examples of open source projects that are available and mature enough that can be implemented on a local scale by local fab labs, startups, or SMEs? Like, for example, the Precious Plastics project.
So, so there's a lot of open source information, particularly if you look into the scientific literature. Don't think about it as a project which comes more from the design world. But if you go into the scientific world, you'll see there's a lot of information available in almost anything you want to work on. So for example, again, bacterial cellulose. There's a lot of projects that talk about how to stain the bacterial cellulose, how to produce more bacterial cellulose, how to have it like, for example, become water resistant or more flexible. With bioplastics, there's a lot of material as well. So you can create bioplastic with plant-based materials or animal-derived materials using gelatin. And you can also find how to make it, again, more elastic, more resistant, have with different properties. So if you want, I can give you my email. I don't know if Dan is going to share my presentation later on with you. You'll have my email, and depending on your interest, I can like give you more examples or connect you with people who are working with things. Because what I've found is that in the design world, because people are not used to publishing, information is more scarce. But there's a lot of projects available and a lot of people working on things that are publicly available. It's just that it's not published somewhere that it's easy to find. Instead, in the scientific literature, scientists are kind of measured by our publications. So we usually publish most of the things we do. Also, patents are available that you can read and access. Yeah, there's a lot of information available. So depending on your interest, I can guide you a little bit.
Yeah, I think we can share some slides with those that have registered for this session afterwards. Tomo, did that answer your question? I guess so. Are there any other questions before we close off this session?
Yes, hi. Thank you again. That was very informative and I learned a lot. So I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina in the United States. We do a lot. I represent the Super Fab Lab there that's coming online and the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And I wanted to know your thoughts on how academia and industry, specifically manufacturers, can work together to integrate some of this biodesign. You mentioned multiple times that scaling was difficult from taking a prototype to production, either distributed manufacturing or manufacturing on a large scale. So I wanted to know your thoughts on how academia and industries can work together. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. I think all the time. So I've seen like different ways how academia and industry can work together. So from the industry to the academia is industry posing challenges. So for example, I am interested in projects that address this challenge, and then they can see at the end of the year through the course different solutions students come up with, and the industry can support some of them to bring them to another level, right? Like support them economically, or because they do have the infrastructure built that many universities do not have. I'm lucky that I'm at a university that has an engineering school, biological sciences school, a whole science department, architecture and design. But there's many schools that are, for example, only design. So they don't have labs to work on or develop further their ideas. So collaboration is crucial. And then the other way around is, for example, something I do in my classes is I do the class where I allow my students to research on the topic they're interested in, or sometimes I give them prompts. Or for example, the Biodesign Challenge sometimes have special prizes that are sponsored by, let's say, Stella McCartney, which is a sustainable fashion, or Mana, which creates beauty products. So then our students work specifically on the challenge that the biodesign poses or states. And then at the end of the class, what I do is invite people from industry. and as jury of the projects. So they start to hear, whoa, I like these things that are coming up at the university. And then industry invites students to work with them. That's also something really nice for scouting students that have like this interdisciplinary background that can help industries become much more innovative. There's a lot of companies that also have innovation programs within the company. So working with professors to help them, like, how do we create methodologies that will allow us in the company to become much more innovative? That's another way to work. And then lastly, finding research grants that can help them work in common interests, companies with academia. For me, let's say challenges are amazing because it always pushes students to work better. When students are working on a project that they're going to present the professor at the end of the school year, it's cool. But when they think that their project can go into an international scenario or win stuff that will be in their CVs and make them differentiate from other design students around the world, that motivates them a little bit more.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, we're almost
Adriana or
running
Brian, I don't know
out of
who
time,
was
so some very short questions.
No, sorry, I just wanted to add something, and maybe not just a question, but I think that is the need of mutual literacy. I think that sometimes we realize that many of this information of these projects are, as you said, like they're maybe in the companies, they don't have the infrastructure to do the things, but there are others and that are like more real situated. And I think that the need of democratization of this knowledge, but also the understanding of the context is very important for the students to help to have the empathy to develop these projects further, and also that has more like impact and let's say resonance in the region. I think that this is also much more needed from both sides, not only for the companies, but also for the research and academia, that they also make this also accessible to the others.
Yeah. For me, it was a surprise from a scientific background arriving to the School of Design. I was teaching students almost in their last semester, or like they were in their senior year. They had never read a research paper in their lives. And I'm like, what? Like, there's so much information available in the scientific literature, but because what you're saying, like, it's not available, or people, depending on the backgrounds, people know certain things and others. And when they ask me do you want to create an undergrad program in biodesign, sometimes I think about it because I don't want to create students that think the same. I think biodesign is so successful because students with different disciplines, from different backgrounds, with different literature and knowledge, come in to work together on one project or a common interest. So yeah, that's important. Brian.
Yeah, we're going to close off with this last question from Brian's colleague.
It's all you, Mohangi. Mohanji,
I can't hear you, Brian.
You're on mute, Mohanji.
Hello there.
There he is. He's in Uganda, so his connection may be a little
Are you
slow.
hearing me?
I can't hear you. Is it me?
Mohanji, you're on mute again. There you go.
Okay, I hope it's clear now. Thank you so much for the presentation about biodesign. And I am from Uganda, specifically working with pushing the Ubuntu narrative, that is a very ancient way to cohabit and coexist with nature, starting from Africa all to the world, because this is extremely endangered as a knowledge of living in harmony with the planet. So I'm on Brian's team too, and my question is, I heard you talk about the mindset, the mindset change. And as Fab City, I believe you're a pioneer in the innovative and sustainable design. And I'm wondering how you envision an integration of all these biodesign principles, such as biomimicry, biofabrication, the circular ecosystems, and all these things, especially looking at a time like this one, whereby in the most urbanized cities around the world, everything has gone bizarre. And when you come down to places like the one where I come from, things are actually at the verge of changing. And we need a mindset that can actually have the locals believe in their traditional knowledge, because most of this traditional knowledge is regenerative and in a way friendly to the environment and friendly to very many production systems. So with a start in most of the most urbanized cities in the world, looking at devices like phones that we are using to share right now, how are we looking at, how do you envision coming down to communities, especially in Africa or the third developing world? I'm not talking in terms of developing in terms of industrialization, but nations that have actually not developed so much into the concrete jungles that we have in the West and the East, where they are being persuaded by the industry at a very, very terrible speed, with a lot of persuasive advertisement still going on here, and everyone, for example, is shifting from using the ancient regenerative methods to new methods that are being advertised on radios and stuff like that, which would be very dangerous. And for a few of us who are informed, sometimes you feel like this is wrong. My community is shifting to copy a civilization that is already crying or already suffering because of the kind of steps that have been taken. So how are you looking forward to mitigating this kind of transformation, especially for communities that I would say have not yet been so much affected by this technology drive that is bringing us to destruction, but have been embedded in circular ecosystems previously? Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's a really great comment. So the book that I've shared, the name is Biodesign for High Schools. So basically, why did I write that for high schools? Because I believe that this methodology should start earlier in the lives of people. So when students are young, they should start having available these active learning pedagogies. So the methodology is not focused on technology, as you say. It's focused on looking at your context, looking at your community, and seeing what are the challenges that we're facing. I always like starting by introducing students the Sustainable Development Goals, because those 17 Sustainable Development Goals are robust, and practically you find almost like a lot of like everything that you think about is contained there, I think so. So it's a good starting point. And then students, I ask them to see what are solutions to this challenge that I'm facing in my community that have been addressed in other parts of the world or in other communities. Or for example, they can see in their own, like, how have we culturally addressed this problem in the past? And then what I encourage them is to investigate a little bit, why does that work? So for example, if let's say you have a disease problem in your community, or a water problem or contamination problem, and certain communities have addressed that problem using a certain plant or something, right, that is traditional to them, they don't necessarily know why it works, but they know it works. So what I would encourage students is understanding, like, why is this working? What is the technology behind it? Because biotechnology is not rocket science necessarily. You don't have to do things that require this sophisticated equipment. Biotechnology is making beer, it's making bread, it's fermentation processes. It's also using inspiration from nature. So you asked, when do I know if biomimicry, biodesign, or what way to go? Biomimicry is always a good approach in the sense when you're talking about communities that know nature really well. So for example, if you have a problem of I don't know, an energy problem, and let's say where you live it's really hot, but you don't really have the infrastructure, or you don't want to invest in things that depend on energy, like fossil fuel derived energy. You can see how organisms in your context protect themselves from heat. And then you observe them, and you start seeing, okay, they have all of these biological strategies. How can I emulate those biological strategies and incorporate them in the design of my buildings? Or how do animals protect from heat? How can I incorporate that into the things I wear? Or how do animals or plants collect water from the environment? And then I can create things that work like the environment. So this is something I would invite you to do in your community, is to become much more like to observe things, but also to look into scientific literature if there's solutions that are available. And solutions, I mentioned it at the beginning of the presentation. Even if the problems are shared globally, solutions have to be local, because communities are different, culture is different, materials are different, access to technology is different. But how do I adapt it, but learning from what has been already implemented in other parts of the world? If you want, I'm happy if you contact me later on, and I can go along the methodology with you and do like different workshops with people in the community, and you'll be surprised how amazing it is. They become much more proactive. They stop thinking solutions are going to arrive to them, and they begin proposing solutions to their own problems.
Great. Thank you. I'll definitely be looking forward to sharing more with you.
Super.
It was a great thing hearing from you and your advances. It's really adorable.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you guys for this engaging discussion. I think we've ran a bit over time, which is fine. But I want to thank Giovanna very much for this interesting presentation as well. I want to notify you all in the chat. I put the link of the registration for the next roundtable, which is on March 4th, same time as today, I believe. So I urge you all to register, and hopefully we'll see you there. So thank you all, and Giovanna will jump to the other link right now.
Which link? The one?
I shared it with you on WhatsApp.
WhatsApp? Okay, perfect. I'll go into WhatsApp because I was in WhatsApp.
Thank you very much, Giovanna.
Thank you all.
Bye bye.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye bye.